I just want to take a moment and talk about what I believe, and I'm sure many others would agree with me, is a really, really important topic for all of us who are leaders. And I'm not just talking about leaders in the church. I know that's where I am now, but I've been a leader in prison before that, working, not locked up, I might add, and a leader as a staff nurse. This is the subject of integrity. And I'm only just going to scratch the surface. I'm just going to poke and prod just a little bit, but we need this. We need leaders in our world, in every sphere of influence, who walk in integrity. What does that mean? I've always loved the definition that integrity is who I am when no one's looking. Do I line up? One of the things that I've really noticed, especially now I stand in front of a microphone, is that one of the most important things is that what I say is what I do. And I just want to make sure that we've got this subject as leaders up front in our thinking. I went to a conference some years ago in 2012, actually. I've honestly never had a problem. I really haven't had a problem with watching anything untoward on a TV. But I was at a training school, in fact, Reinhard Bonnke's School of Evangelism, and I was so privileged to be there. I walked into the hotel room on a Sunday afternoon, and I unplugged the television. And I didn't do it because I had a problem. I did it because I wanted to decide that week that I was going to be focused and not distracted. And I wanted to learn something. Could I trust me? Could I trust Paul Manwaring? Because that is really where integrity starts. Can I trust myself? And I've just noticed that it's a place of real pressure as soon as we have any sort of public ministry or public presence, whether it's in church or it's in politics, or for me running a prison. Can I trust me? Do I do what I say? Do I do what I expect the people who work for me to do? These are really important issues. And we've been running through this little bit of a sequence with sonship and empowering and integrity. It's the same thing. You see, Jesus talked about this. He said, you're white-walled sepulchres. You're nicely painted graves, but you're dead on the inside. You look nice on the outside, but on the inside, you're dead. He was really talking about integrity there. And so this is a really important subject. I want to just highlight a couple of thoughts on this. It's really about managing me. Do I make a good job of managing me? And I kind of joke about it and talk about the fivefold: body, soul, spirit, wallet, and relationships. Am I managing those areas of my life? Because the likelihood is, as a leader, I will be managing those areas in someone else's life. But if I am not looking after them myself, then you know what? I'm a hypocrite. And that's why it's important that we make sure that we are managing our lives according to the same standards and principles that we expect of other people. I know it's a little bit out of context, but where James talks about a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways, I actually think it applies here. Double-mindedness is one of the greatest threats to us as leaders. Double-mindedness would be that we would say something and do another. I know it's not a perfect translation, but that's really the problem. Now, what I've noticed as well is this, that the greatest challenges that I face in my life are related to the books I write and the strongest messages that I preach. And it's really important for me not to present those things as something that I've completely achieved or completely mastered, but actually that I stay vulnerable in those areas. Let me tell you one of them. I preach a message called Three Chairs or My Gospel. Doesn't matter what title is on it, but it's basically this: the three chairs are past, present, and future. The greatest enemy of your past, of your testimonies, the greatest enemy is regret. And it's simple. Regret's the greatest enemy of your testimonies, and regret will give you a past without victory or value. Let me tell you, I find myself fighting that. I find myself thinking, did I do the right thing? Was that the right decision? I tell you this, the enemy is so crafty. He can get me thinking that I'm regretting something that I had no control over when it happened. You see, regret will give me a past without victory or value. And the future, the greatest enemy of your prophetic destiny is fear. And fear, as many of us say, is to imagine a future without God in it. And it's a battle. The fear will give you a future without God in it. That's the greatest enemy of your prophetic destiny. And here's the thing, shame, feeling less than, is the greatest enemy of me being present. I want to tell you this, those three are real to me. Fighting regret, shame, and fear, they're real. They don't beat me, but I want to tell you this, that those are places where the challenge can come. Those very areas that I teach about. Or what about probably one of my favorite messages, and I've been teaching it a lot more just lately. He wastes nothing. He gets you ready. Well, I can tell you, I have to stay on top of it. I have to keep reminding myself that he's never let me down before. I have to remind myself of the victories of my life. I have to stay on top of these things. That's because our faith is living and active. It's alive. And it really is true, you know, that integrity, it's the key. Learning to walk in integrity, having people in our lives that we can be honest with and vulnerable with and say, hey, this is where I am right now. And we need to become leaders who what we say is what we do. And we need to be narrowing the gap. If there's any area in your life where what you say is not what you do, we've got to narrow that gap. And one of the key ways to narrowing that gap is actually to learn to trust you, to set yourself goals like mine. 5 days in a hotel room, TV unplugged. I'm not going to be distracted, not by sinful stuff. It's not been a problem in my life, but not be distracted by having the news on or watching the sport late into night. And it was in that hotel room that I got to lie on my bed and talk to God about what my personal story would be as I walked through that school of evangelism. And he gave it to me. It was an hour and a half. I laid on my bed reading one chapter of the Bible, which I'll never forget. Can you trust you? That's what I want to challenge you with tonight. Leader, I want to challenge you. Are you who you say you are? Do you do what you say you do? Hey, this doesn't just apply to church leaders. Let me tell you this. I had a wonderful boss. Funnily enough, he wrote to me today. I guess he's nearly 80 now. A wonderful man. And, you know, he was such an integrous man. He really was. And he often paid a price for it. You know, he never wanted his staff he knew that he was the boss. He knew that if he stayed at work, his staff would stay at work longer than him. They wouldn't go home before him. Do you know what he used to do? He used to drive down the road, park his car in a car parking lot with a pile of paperwork, and he would sit for an hour or 2 hours before he drove home at night, because he never took his work home with him because he was integrous. But he also knew that if he stayed at work in the office, his immediate managers would stay too. It was an extraordinary level of integrity. And, you know, he was criticized for that. I was in meetings where the unions would say, you always check off at that particular time at night. You know, you don't work long days. But he and I both knew the truth of that story. See, he was an integrous man. He wouldn't take his work home, but he was a family man. And he knew that he wanted his staff to get home to their families. He's the man who said to me the day before he came to work in the prison and become in charge of it, he invited me up to headquarters for lunch. And he said, Paul, there's 2 rules working for me. I said, I'm all ears. I didn't know what to expect. I was eating a very, very good sandwich, I have to say. And he said, it doesn't matter who I'm on the phone to, who's in my office. If my family call, you interrupt. Rule number 1. Have you got it? Yes, sir. Rule number 2. The same thing applies to you. You see what he said he did. And I just want to encourage you. Do you trust you? and set yourself some simple goals to learn to trust you. Maybe an area of your weakness, maybe an area of challenge, maybe your favorite message, maybe something you're accused at work. Well, set yourself a goal and learn to trust you. It's one of the keys to integrity. And alongside that is accountability. And we'll probably have a look at that another time. So it's time. We need to raise up a generation of integrous leaders. It's absolutely vital that we are who we say we are, and we do what we say we do, and that our motives are what we say they are.